What you guys, got another video here for you. These are the PC parts. We're going to be building a computer where there's no GPU needed because it has one built in. So we got the Nova M TECWARE mini case. Keep an eye out for TECWARE cases. They're pretty affordable and pretty decent. We're going for the ASUS B550 Prime motherboard with Wi-Fi capability. TEAMGROUP 1TB NVMe drive. For the memory, we've gone for Thermaltake's 4400 MHz 16GB kit. Deep cool GAMMAXX GT air cooler, Ryzen 5 4650 with onboard graphics, some addressable RGB fans, and the EVGA 550 watt power supply, which is fully modular. So this is the motherboard we went for, the Prime B550 MA Wi-Fi version. You can use whatever motherboard you like. Now the good thing about this particular motherboard is it's going to allow you to overclock the onboard GPU, which is going to be beneficial because we want to get as much out of that GPU as possible to get better frame rates. So inside the box you're going to get your Wi-Fi antennas. Now if you don't need the Wi-Fi antennas, you can get the non-Wi-Fi version, which is a bit cheaper. Inside here you're going to have your motherboard, and also we're going to have our SATA cable, IO shield, your user manual, and some motherboard screws for the M.2 slot there as well, and pretty much your warranty, and that is it. Now if you're on a tighter budget and you don't want to buy this particular board, you can get the A520 motherboards, but those are not overclockable and you're going to have trouble overclocking the GPU with that board. Also it has a lot of features missing, like addressable RGB, fan headers, only 2 slots on the board for RAM, and there's no heatsink or anything like that as well. So we've got our 4 SATA ports here, addressable RGB, loads of fan headers on here, about 3 or 4 of them. We've got our slot for our card here, 4 bays for memory, also a 24-pin and USB 3.0 on here as well. We also have that cooler on here for our VRMs, which is going to be nice, just give us a little bit more cooling. And again, you get some extra added bonuses like 2 M.2 slots, and your audio is down here as well. And on this back end, you can see there's a few USB slots on here, some audio, Wi-Fi, and some connectivity for your monitors. So it's got everything you're going to need for this particular type of build. Again, I do like this board because it does come with some options which some of the cheaper boards don't come with, which can cause a few problems. So this is the APU I went with. It's the Ryzen 4650G. It's pretty tough to get hold of, but if you look you can find it online. So I'm going to pull up the retention lever here and also look at the triangle on the board and look for the triangle on the processor, as you can see here in the corner. Be careful of those pins, you don't want to be touching those. Just marry that up with the triangle on the board and it should just slot straight in. And then once you've got this slotted in, you can pull down the retention lever here. Try not to touch the top of the CPU, you don't want oily residue getting on there. If you do touch it or you want to clean it, you can use some isopropanol to clean that up a bit. Next up, we're going to put our solid state drive in here. This is our M.2 NVMe drive. We're going to put this into the board. These are pretty affordable nowadays. You can pick these up for around about £80 to £100 for a 1TB NVMe drive. So get the standoff out of the motherboard box here. It comes in a little bag, and just screw that into the correct position on the board. And then what we need to do is get our drive and slot it into the M.2 slot here. Only goes in one way, just be a bit careful here, just push it in and it should look like a little springboard here. Now we need to screw down with the little tiny screw here. Now these are pretty tricky at the best of times, so just take your time and don't cross thread it, and screw that down and you should have a drive in position. There we go, that's simple. Now if you want to save a bit of money, you can always use a cheaper SSD instead of an NVMe drive. So next up, we're going to be dealing with the cooler. Now you can use the stock cooler, but I'm going to be using an aftermarket cooler. So I'm going to need to remove these brackets here. They're held on with 4 screws. Now this is probably going to be the best option to get yourself a little PC built today in 2021 because of the market situation. You can't get your hands on GPUs or anything like that. Whereas this GPU with a little bit of overclocking and some really fast RAM, you should be able to play games like Valorant, CSGO, Forza, any of those sorts of games with this Grand Theft Auto 5. It can handle all those games, no problems at all. So let's lift up the board here and pull out the back plate, because we've removed all of those screws and brackets. Now we can remove the back plate. Let's get the screws from our kit here, which are little standoff screws. We need those for our backplate, which we're going to have to install here. So these come with a little nut on here. You just need to push these into the hole here, and they should click in place. And once they're in position here, that should give us the option to put this onto the back of the motherboard here, just like so. Now, sometimes with some coolers, you can actually use the default backplate that comes with the motherboard, but in this case, you can't. You have to use their plastic backplate. So just put these little nuts into the little holes here and push them into position, and they should clip in there. And once they're done, they will have a little thread on the other side, which you can then screw into. So just hold this into position and flip it over. And you want to put this onto a solid surface here, not a cardboard box or anything like that, because you're going to get some flex in there, and it's not going to be easy to screw this down to, and you can actually crack the traces on the motherboard. So get this into position now and put our little standoffs on here. They've got a little thread on them, and this is so we can screw down the bracket onto these. So there's 4 of these to screw down to the board, and you're just going to use finger tightness on these. You don't want to over tighten them. So once you've got those down and you've screwed them in, we're going to just go around and test them finger tight, make sure they're all nicely firm, just like so. Now, you don't want to be using a pair of pliers or anything like that on here, because you can over tighten these, and of course it's only going into a thread with some plastic on the back, so you don't want to damage that at all. So here is the brackets. There's 2 of them. There's an Intel one and an AMD one. So we're going to be using the AMD, of course, because we've got an AMD chip. And you can see here, this is the position they need to go into. Now these are movable, these screws, so you can just move them into the correct position, because there's different types of boards that these fit. So you just push these into the right position, and then you would offer these up to the actual cooler itself, and they go into a little channel here, and then you screw down with the screw that comes in the kit. Pretty straightforward stuff. Pretty easy installation mechanism, this. And there's a little notch out on here, and this needs to go the correct way around, otherwise you're going to end up putting the cooler on the wrong way. So just screw this down, and once we've got this screwed up, we'll put the other side on, and then we can start thinking about putting some thermal compound on and getting this screwed down to the motherboard. So that is the bracket on one side here. Just going to follow suit and put it onto the other side as well. And you can see this does have 4 heat pipes on each side, which are nice copper ones. So I've got them both on here now, and that's how it should look, exactly like that. Need to remove this sticker, don't forget, you need to remove that, otherwise you're going to end up with problems. And once we've got that removed, we can now add some compound. Now again, this is another heavily debatable topic of how much you should put on. It does come with its own compound in the kit, but I'm going to be using my own MX4 compound here. This is pretty good, affordable compound, does a pretty good job. And just splodge a bit on there. Now you can either leave it as it is and just put the cooler down, or you can use the spread method, or the line method, or the cross method, or whatever method you want to use. And again, you're going to get people saying you put too much, you put too little, whatever it is, it won't make much difference. It just looks okay, just the amount I've got on here, and any surplus will be stuck to the glove. So it's just the right amount going on there. Once we've got that down, we can now put on our cooler. Make sure you got the cable round the right side where the RAM slots are, because we can run that up to where the fan header is on the board. And once we've got this in position, we can then get our screwdriver and tighten these down. On a crisscross motion, just go into the screw and push down. You need to be a bit firm with it, but don't go all the way down straight away on one screw, because you'll have trouble getting it into the opposite end. So just get a nice bite on it, and then move yourself around the cooler until it's nice and tight. And try not to over tighten these. But this little mechanism here, you can't really over tighten them. It just, once it gets to the end, it just stops. So that's exactly the sort of coolers I like to install. So let's go ahead and just finish this off. There we go. And just going to go around and check, just a final little tweak. You can see this one needs a bit more turning. There we go. So that is the CPU cooler now installed on the system. What I need to do is put on the fan. Now, as these little wire clips, which is pretty common for a lot of these coolers, you just put the wire clip on the side, on the back holes, and then clip that into position like so. And you get a couple of extra ones of these just in case you want to add another fan and have some sort of push-pull situation on this cooler. I don't think it's necessary. One fan is probably going to be ample for this particular build. So let me just go ahead and clip this into position, and you can straighten these up with the clips. You can see the right side's just a little slight up, and I'll address that a little bit later on. So let's get the cables in position here. And what we're going to do is unclip all these cables. They do come with these little wire cable ties. Never use these wire cable ties for your cable management, because they have little pieces of wire in them, and sometimes they're showing at the ends, and if they touch the board when the motherboard is powered on, it will short the board. So be very careful using those. I've seen a few people using those in their build videos. It's not advisable. So let's just take these off. So I'll quickly remove those, and now we can plug in our fan header onto the board here. There's two of them here. One says CPU optional, one says CPU. That one is for a water pump and one is for the fan, so we're going to put that into the fan one. Now make sure you keep the back plate and the brackets, screw them into something like this and keep them safe, just in case you want to sell the motherboard, or if you're giving it away to someone, you can always give them the back plate. So let's go ahead and put in our RAM. This is 4400 megahertz RAM, pretty expensive RAM, so you can use the cheaper stuff if you wish, but you won't get as much performance out of it. So there are two retention levers on the side of the RAM slot, the other side are solid, and what we're going to do here is pull out our RAM and slot it in to the correct slots. They should be marked on the board, but they're normally color coordinated here. So I'm just going to slot this in and click it down into position. So as you can see, the RAM is pretty high profile, and it does allow me to populate all four in here without intruding onto this fan here, which is a good sign. Now also, you wouldn't be populating all four of these with a budget board like this. It would be a bit pointless, and plus this is pretty expensive RAM. It's 4400 megahertz. Now you can literally get 3600 megahertz and overclock it to 4000 megahertz, and that way you're getting the benefit of faster RAM, because AMD does love super fast RAM. So let's get our IO shield into the case. I'm just checking here to make sure that it's fully seated and there is no sort of grounding straps that are pushed out or anything like that that's going to intrude onto the actual motherboard itself. And we need to put a couple of more standoffs in here. There's a couple missing and they come in the kit, so I will literally screw those in finger tight and then get a little ratchet to tighten those down, because we don't want a spinning screw with a standoff. That is the worst case scenario, which can be a nightmare to get out. So let's just tighten that down. Okay, so let's get the motherboard in. I'm just going to hold on to the cooler and offer this up and slot that into the IO shield, making sure there's no cables underneath or anything like that. So just remove any of those out the way. And as you can see, building a PC is pretty straightforward nowadays. People do overcomplicate things, but it is pretty straightforward. It's just choosing the right parts for the right build and getting it looking just how you want it. And you can see this motherboard fits in this case perfectly. There's not a lot of space left in here, and that's exactly what I like, to utilize the case properly. Seen so many people using large cases with small motherboards, and it just looks horrible when it's finished. The cables are all over the place and on show, and I don't like it. So just try to get the right case for the right build that you're doing, and you should be good to go. TECWARE have got some really cheap, affordable cases, so check their website out, and they're pretty affordable. So we're going to go for this EVGA 550 watt power supply bronze, fully modular. Picked this up on a real flash sale, about £34 or something like that, which is an absolute bargain for this particular type of power supply. Now, if you buying another sort of power supply and you're watching this video, then make sure that you get one that suits your budget. You don't want to be paying, you know, £80 or £100 for a power supply on a build like this. You can see this one comes with its own cables that are not attached to the actual power supply, which means cable management is going to be a breeze in this particular type of build. So I'm just going to be using for this build the motherboard and the CPU, because I don't need any other type of cables at the moment, because we don't have any sort of hard drives, GPU or any other sort of stuff that needs extra cables but I will put these in the box when I go to sell this PC, which means the client will have the actual power supply with the extra cables if he upgrades in the future. So all we need to do now is screw this down with the 4 screws that come in the kit, and I'll get this screwed in. Now, buying a good quality power supply is very important. I made a video not so long ago where we talk about how to recognize a rubbish power supply and a good power supply, and how to look for a decent quality power supply and get the right one for your build. And that's really important, because if these pop and let go, it will take all your components with them if it's a cheap one. So we've got our 24 pin here. I'm just going to poke this through, and I'm also going to poke through the CPU cable up the top here. And you can see there's hardly any cables around the back here, and that's because I haven't plugged them all in. And that's the beauty of modular power supplies. So all I need to do here now is plug this into the motherboard. That's the 24 pin in. And once I've done this, I can then go ahead and plug in the CPU cable. And with this case, this Nova M case, you can see there's a bit of space up the top here, which gives me plenty of room to be able to put this CPU cable in very easily indeed. And some of these can be very tricky up here, can be very tight, but this one seems to be pretty easy. Now I need to put the front panel connectors in, and there's a little diagram on here because you don't want to see anything because my big hand is in the way. Basically, it's pretty much the same for all the motherboards. Just follow that diagram and you should have those in. And we need to get our USB 3.0 cable plugged into the board as well. I've also got some other cables to take care of, which is the audio cable and also the fan cables, which I'm just going to daisy chain and basically plug them into the headers on the board. I'm going to put in a few fans, 3 fans, 2 on top and 1 at the back as an exhaust fan. So we are pretty much done. Let's just take a look at the end result. So how do you guys think that turned out? I think it turned out pretty well, and it's got plenty of room for upgradability in this PC. You can put a graphics card in here at a later date and also some more RAM and plenty of other options available. All in all, I'm pretty pleased with it, and I think whoever gets it will be also. Now, again, I will be doing some benchmarks and some gameplay on this so you can see exactly what you can expect from this particular type of machine in the next up and coming video, so stay tuned for that one. Just want to say a big shout out to all my YouTube members who joined my YouTube members group. I really do appreciate the support. All the links for the build are in the video description. My name has been Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.